Bored of inadequate film podcasts?
Frustrated by amateurish, immature content creators masquerading as film critics?
Then we have just the film podcast for you.
It's called Kermode and Mayo's Take.
And you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Roll the tape. Correspondence at kermodeandmayo.com. We've had a number of emails about Robert Redford, obviously,
yes,
who passed sadly this week. And I'll get to some of them in just a moment. And when, obviously, the obits have been ready for a long time, because within 5 minutes of the announcement, there was an incredible, 15-minute read in the New York Times with all the iconic photographs.
Wow!
In one particular article. And I know there are lots and lots of other movies to consider, but have two men ever looked better than Paul Newman and Robert Redford in Butch and Sundance, whether they be the black and white photographs or the color ones where they're leaning up against the door? Just genuinely astonishing.
Well, can I say that they look equally fabulous in The Sting?
Yes, I think Butch and Sundance wins slightly, but anyway, let's just see what we've got here. Bernie Scroggins, Butch. We were basically saying top Robert Redford performances.
Yes.
What comes to mind? Bernie Scroggins, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid for sheer 1,000-watt star power and charisma. The Old Man and the Gun, great later performance. Film isn't brilliant, but Redford shines. 3 Days of the Condor, an understated performance, but carries the film beautifully. Russell George says All the President's Men, Sneakers, because he makes it look so effortless, and despite The Sting and The Natural and Sundance all being top tier, All is Lost, because it's just him all the way through.
Yeah.
Trellis says Sneakers, just an utterly charming film. If it's been on 5 minutes, if I join and it's 5 minutes in or just 20 minutes to go, I'll always sit and watch. Neil Hallam, so difficult, but off the top of my head, The Last Castle, The Electric Horseman, and The Old Man and the Gun. Someone who appears to be called the Hollins Eco-Anarchist Collective, where they take it in turns to be Executive Officer of the Week. Gatsby, Butch and Sundance, and All the President's Men would be my entirely predictable, uncontroversial picks, but probably his greatest contribution to cinema would be all the work that came to light via the Sundance Festival and his championing of independent vision.
Yes.
Mohammed Shakir says Out of Africa is an underrated performance. The performances, scenery and score all working in harmony. Colin McDougall, top three. All the President's Men, Spy Game, and Barefoot in the Park. Although considering journalism at the moment, number one becomes less a realistic performance of a real person and more a brilliant fictional performance about what journalism should be. I saw someone today suggest that everyone at the Washington Post should sit down and watch it all the way through before they resume their work.
Yeah, very good.
And Mr. Wapogif, anyway, All is Lost. Thought this was a brilliant later career performance from him, very physical and not much dialogue. Before a general consideration, what would you throw into the mix in terms of stuff to watch?
Well, I'm sort of surprised that no one's brought up The Way We Were, because that really was, it's a great performance and it's a great film. I remember going to see it in the cinema when it first came out, and, I was young and it was a kind of grown-up film, but it was absolutely just a wonderful sweeping story. And I watched that film just a year or so ago, and it's great. The Sting came out 73 in America, 74 here, famously beat The Exorcist to the Oscar for Best Picture. And I remember seeing that and loving it. And I saw that before I saw Butch and Sundance, which I then loved again. The Great Waldo Pepper is another thing which people kind of overlook, because I think that's a great performance. But it is arguable that his greatest contribution, other than, as the Sundance Festival, was his work as a director, because, he directed Ordinary People. He directed Quiz Show. He was a really great director. In fact, I interviewed him back in the 90s. I did a Radio 2 documentary about him, about his work as a director. And afterwards, he sent this really nice letter, like a handwritten letter, saying that he enjoyed the program, but more importantly saying, I do think that radio is the greatest of all mediums, and if preferably, it would always be radio for me. And I remember thinking that's good, because he had, not only did he look amazing, he had a brilliant voice, but I love the fact that he was a filmmaker who loved radio.
I was recalling the the live show that we did when we were on the radio, and we had
Yeah.
the last hour of the program was with Robert Redford. It was the Sundance sort of London branch, wasn't it? And
That was,
so
yeah,
we had
exactly.
hundreds of people in the hall, and we'd done the reviews. So the last hour was Robert Redford, but we all knew that he was famously late for everything.
Famously.
And thought, we could probably have got away with it somehow if he turned up at 20 to 4. But fortunately, I think he arrived a minute early. And Paulie McPoolface, who was still running things there, said he arrived a minute early and then said, would it be okay if I went and got a coffee? But he was only joking when he'd seen the look of horror across his face.
The other thing,
and then you remember when it was a great conversation with him, and I noticed that his watch had been moved to like 3:45, so that his watch was permanently like 45 minutes ahead of ordinary time. So there was Redford time and there was GMT.
But he still managed to almost be late. The other thing I remember really clearly was when he walked up on stage, he looked in the flesh absolutely, incredible. And it was that thing that every now and then when you're in the presence of movie stars, their movie stardom shines through. And he literally walked on stage and it was like the whole room lit up. There was an audible intake of breath because it was Robert Redford. And I did a thing on stage with him at Edinburgh once when I was on stage at Edinburgh and he was in the Sundance Institute and he was being beamed live via satellite back at a time when that was still quite a big deal. And I was sitting on this thing, saying, well, Mr. Redford is going to be coming any moment. It was the same thing. Like it was meant to start at 4:00 and at, 3:59 and 30 seconds, he wasn't there. And then at 4:00, the thing went on and suddenly Robert Redford's face, the size of a house, appeared behind me, like the face of God or something. And the whole room went, and it was, yeah. No, he's a proper movie star. Can I just read you something that he said in 2019? We're up against a crisis I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. A dictator-like attack by President Donald Trump on everything this country stands for. Our shared tolerance, respect for the truth, our sacred rule of law, our essential freedom of the press, and our precious freedoms of speech all have been threatened by a single man. It is time for Trump to go, along with those in Congress who have chosen party loyalty over their oath to solemnly affirm their support for the Constitution of the United States. That was in 2019.
David Putnam was on Radio 4 yesterday, and he said, I think he was quite upset, actually, because they were friends. And he said he was particularly kind to him in the mid-'80s when Putnam was running a Hollywood studio. And, and he said, and I was struggling, but he was fantastic, went out of his way to be very supportive for everything that David Putnam was trying to do. And he said there is a reason that Robert Redford and Tom Hanks are particularly hated by Trump, because they are gutsy and decent people. They are the kind of... Yeah. It's Trump at one end, and there's Redford and Hanks at the other. So there's a reason for all that. And I like the quote that he said, I was born with a hard eye. I would see what was wrong and what could be better. There you go. And Meryl Streep, when Meryl Streep said one of the lions has passed, we thought, okay, that's sort of it, really. Yeah. And that is definitely true. And the way I love the idea of him appearing on a screen and everyone gasping because it's actually him. Correspondence at kermodeandmayo.com. I'm sure there'll be more Robert Redford stuff later on and in next week's show, because it's all still comparatively fresh as we speak at the moment. You've mentioned Cillian Murphy and his film Steve.